Tax fraud and worker wage theft in America exposed in a new report. Trump's merry band of union spies, and the latest news from the world of labor is next as Labor This Week begins now. Hello, I'm Mark Harrison. A commissioned report titled How Cheating Hurts All of Us was released last week by the United Brotherhood of Carpenters, and it finds that the misclassification of workers as independent contractors is costing the American taxpayer hundreds of millions of dollars in tax fraud. The report, which was authored by professors at Harvard and Michigan State Universities and Allegheny College, found that tax fraud through the misclassification of workers occurred at up to 20% of construction sites nationwide and was affecting as many as 2 million workers. And because developers were skirting around labor laws, workers were losing more than $800 million in overtime pay. The report also noted that this practice was costing taxpayers $8.5 million in lost revenues at state and federal levels. The decision to commission the report stems from a sense of fairness, according to the United Brotherhood of Carpenters General President, Douglas J. McCarran, who said, quote, "For years, the main challenge slowing law enforcement and legislative action combating tax fraud was a lack of data," adding, "It's time for our leaders to step up and take action." The tax fraud often comes not only in misclassifying workers as independent contractors, but in paying them off the books and in cash. Now, by doing this, businesses not only evade their tax obligations, they also fail to provide legally required benefits like workers' compensation, unemployment insurance, and overtime pay, and they fail to contribute to Social Security, Medicare, and other state and federal programs. My thanks to Joe Maniscalco at laborpress.org for contributing to this story. I'll be back in a moment with how working class life is killing Americans. Ann Case and Agnes Deaton, both Princeton University economists, first wrote about America's deaths of despair 5 years ago, and at that time concentrated their findings on the shocking data that showed white middle-aged Americans who were considered working class were dying younger than in previous times. In other words, the trend of well-off Americans living longer every year had been found to have reversed itself. Indeed, they were dying at younger and younger ages. Causes of death were being tied to increases in suicide rates, increases in alcohol and drug addiction, and obesity. But over the years, as the couple dug deeper and deeper into their findings, it became increasingly clear that the death rates were not only increasing for white America, but they were increasing for all races and colors of Americans, with one thing in common: a lack of a college education. In fact, to describe their newest book, Deaths of Despair and the Future of Capitalism, in one line would be to say that the working class life in America is more difficult than it is in any other high-income country. Now, according to Case, in quote, "European countries have faced the same kind of technological change we have, and they're not seeing the people killing themselves with guns or drugs or alcohol," adding, "There is something unique about the way the U.S. is handling this." Indeed, the black community has experienced a surge in deaths of despair in the last few years as well. And one of the problems, as the authors put it, is that life for many low and middle class income workers, no matter and regardless of race, no longer has a structure. Many of these workers no longer identify with a particular company or a brand. And because of the proliferation of subcontracting, people no longer know when they will be working or where. Schedules and locations can sometimes change on a weekly or even daily basis. Their lives lack stability and connection. For college graduates versus non-college graduates, marriage rates are lower. Attendance and identification with religious institutions are lower. Non-college degreed people experience and live with more chronic pains and ailments, and they drink more. And non-college graduates report that they are much more unhappy in overall terms than those who hold degrees. Now, all of these trends have increased markedly over the last decade and a half. When asked what can be done to reverse this alarming trend, Case and Deaton admit the answers will be difficult to accomplish. But they point to an overall of the medical system in our country where priority could be the actual health of patients versus the wealth of those in charge. And they say that the federal government must do a better job in keeping big businesses from maximizing profits at the expense of workers by actively enforcing antitrust laws and encouraging new kinds of labor unions. And they feel that governments should do a better job of helping people earn four-year college and vocational degrees. We'll be right back. Employees are being told to stay home from work if they are sick with the possible coronavirus or anything for that matter. But while that may work for many who can telecommute from home, the lower paid workers in the service industry don't usually have that option. In fact, paid sick leave is not a U.S. labor law, and about a quarter of American workers don't have it at all, let alone health insurance. And the fact is that most of these workers can fall perilously behind financially with just 1 or 2 days of missed work from being sick, and are thereby forced to go to work while they are possibly contagious. And more importantly, most of the workers who fall into this category work in industries like hospitality and food service, where the risk of spreading illness through human contact is at its greatest. Perhaps Vice President Pence, working to curtail the spread of corona on behalf of our president, will extend a helping hand to these poor folks. Not likely. According to a report out by the Economic Policy Institute, Medicare for All would not affect the total number of jobs in the U.S. economy and might actually boost wages. Additionally, the report says job quality would increase by guaranteeing health care to all workers. It would also lessen the stress of economic stress on a sector of the working population and produce a net increase in jobs as public spending boosts the aggregate demand for jobs in and of itself. Amazon will lay off 3,200 drivers next month in order to replace them with cheaper workers, a move critics say is designed to cut costs and consolidate power over workers. Meanwhile, these guys pay a mere 1% in taxes and earned $13 billion in profits last year. 1 week, we'd like to not have to do a story about Amazon, right? These guys were always talking about them in some way or shape or form. All right, moving on. Modular components for large commercial buildings are now being prefabricated overseas and shipped to the U.S. for assembly, cutting 2/3 of the normal contingent of American workers out of good-paying construction jobs altogether. Now, currently in New York, there is a 26-story building under construction along 6th Avenue that is being built in sections from modular units that are built in Poland and shipped over to the U.S. and trucked to the site where they are assembled to create the building. It's a trend that is predicted to increase dramatically over the coming years. And the good news is that America has surged ahead of the competition in the world's top hotspot for the fabulously rich. In fact, the number of 30 million plus fortunes in the U.S. rose some 6% alone just last year. I'll be right back with some thoughts about Trump's band of union spies. Donald Trump promised to make America great again and to restore jobs and dignity to the working class. But his actions have proved anything but. His executive orders, to be sure, have been off-putting for many workers, but mostly it has been his actions through his revolving door of a cabinet that have done the most harm. And his appointment of federal judges and Supreme Court justices with long and dubious records of ruling against workers' rights flies in the face of making America great again for its workers. His NLRB has rolled back regulations that previous administrations put in place to show respect and offer dignity to workers and to improve their working lives. But nothing, up until this point, has pulled back the curtain on who this president really is, as much as the revelation last week that Education Secretary Betsy DeVos's brother, Eric Prince, who is a security contractor with close ties to the Trump administration, has been infiltrating American labor unions with undercover spies. Indeed, it was revealed last week that a former British intelligence officer from MI6 had been recruited to record conversations in a Michigan office of the American Federation of Teachers, one of the largest teachers' unions in our nation. The former spy, Richard Snedden, directed an undercover operation to gather information to be used against the organization by ordering operatives to record the conversations of local leaders with the express purpose of harming the union. The union, which, by the way, has been a thorn in lots of people's sides by striking successfully and achieving tremendous gains, not only for themselves as far as wages and benefits go, but also gaining hard-fought and selfless improvements for their students, our children, and America's future. Snedden's operation on behalf of Prince was also found to have spied on congressional campaigns and news organizations. Now, the campaign, as it turns out, discovered the mole, fired her, and went on to win. Not only are these guys devious and underhanded, they're pretty stupid, too. Now, when asked about the story, AFT president and a very bold union leader, in my opinion, Randy Weingarten, said they didn't succeed in their attempt to hurt our union. But note what the right wing will do to try to eliminate workers' voices. She is so spot on with that. So it's at this point when we have to ask ourselves, who really are the stupid ones? Is it those among us who voted for the president believing that a member of the millionaire class and a billionaire wannabe like Donald Trump would really give a crap about regular, hardworking Americans like us? New York Times best-selling author Seth Abramson said on his Twitter account last week that Erik Prince is building a private spy army in the United States with Trump's knowledge. And we also know that Erik Prince was the one that recruited a spy to infiltrate one or more powerful labor unions. Now, do we have to spell this out? Okay, it's time to forget all of the noise and disinformation and the lies by omission that the millionaire on-air personalities like Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson over at Fox News are putting out, and to begin to put the facts together. Immigrants aren't coming for your jobs. No one's coming for your guns, and there's no deep state trying to destroy the white race. Billionaires, by way of their puppet in the White House, are the ones coming for us, for our incomes, for our health care, for our futures, and for what shreds remain of our American lifestyles. Remember, there is an election in November. I'm Mark Harrison, and I'll see you next week.